Welcome back to the Becoming Her podcast. Dr. Ann and I are back for another, as I always say, I'm sure you guys can predict as we're going to be talking about predictive coding and self-talk, but for another fire podcast.
Yes.
As I always say, it's funny because I asked Anne, I was like, what's top of mind for you? And so we're going to be talking about, she had titled it Predictive Coding and Self-Talk. I'm like, ooh, give me more on this. So I'm like prepared because we don't really like outline or script the podcast. They're so off the cuff. But I was so excited when when you brought this up because it's funny. I was just thinking about this yesterday, actually, that I used to think about self-talk and mindset talk as the woo, right? Like I always looked at it as so woo-woo because
hmm
honestly, it was just uncomfortable to sit with, to be
hmm
completely frank. And I always thought it was the tactical that drove results for me. I'm like, it's the macros, it's the movement, it's the training. And yes, yes, absolutely. Those things absolutely drive results. I'm not saying that they don't, but outside of all of that, if we cannot rewire what's going on upstairs, I would say you can't, I can give you the best training split, the best macro program, the best of the best of the best of the best. But if we don't rewire what's going on upstairs, nothing will be sustainable. And I love talking about this with you because you love to geek out on the neuroscience side, which I absolutely love.
Yep.
So if you're somebody who's listening to this podcast who even resonates with that slightly, and you're like anything like me, where it's all I need the actionable, I need the macros, I need the frameworks, but you want to ignore the mental side of this, I promise you're going to dig yourself 10 feet deeper. Like you have to confront what's going on upstairs. So I'm just like
Yes.
super, super excited to geek out and chat about this a little bit. Like I said, Anne's going to chat the neuroscience part. I want to talk about as hormones decline, specifically for midlife women, how this really does rewire brain chemistry. Like you're almost working with a completely
hmm
different brain at not almost, you're working with a completely different brain at 45 than you were at 30. That's just the reality
Yes.
of what it is. And so,
Yes.
and I'm gonna let you kick us off here because I have so many questions for you. And like I said, I'm just so excited to geek out about this, but still the show, girlfriend.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think one of the interesting parts about this, because you do the coaching realm and I do the mental health realm, is that most women, when they come to us, they actually aren't lazy. They're not undisciplined. They have built careers. They've raised families. They run households. Sometimes they're even running their own business for crying out loud. So what we know by fact base is that discipline is not actually the problem. And so many women come in and they say that discipline is. The problem is somewhere along the way, the brain filled them with this idea that I'm a person who can't succeed at this. And
Mhm.
that part of your brain actually started making decisions for you based upon that profile. That is not a character flaw, though. That is neuroscience and it's actually changeable. And this is where I get really excited because when people are talking to themselves, and I hear it in my office, and Nicole, I want to ask you what it is that you hear, but the phrases that I tend to hear are, "That's too hard," and I'm gonna shape that one for just a moment because usually when people are saying that's too hard, they're saying I don't do hard things.
Mhm.
It's
Yep.
about us, right? Or I'm just not good at that. Um, I'm a failure when it comes to this.
I've tried absolutely everything. That is the number one thing here. I've tried absolutely everything to lose weight and nothing works. And I'm like,
Yep.
push back on that a little bit because I've worked with thousands of women at this point. So I can promise you, you have not tried everything. You've tried the things that keep you in the same predictive loop and pattern, absolutely, but you have not tried everything because if you did, you would have lost the weight by now. You're not the exception to the rule, as I always say. You're not the special
hmm
unicorn. You're not the one person that this won't work for. But yeah, that is the number one thing I hear every single day. I've tried absolutely everything to lose weight and nothing works anymore, especially when you hit menopause.
And by the way, what we're saying when we make that phrase, it's not about the things that we've tried. We're actually making a statement about ourselves that's encoded in our mind.
Exactly. I'm incapable of this. I've tried everything.
That's
That
it.
means I'm incapable. It's a me
That's
thing.
it.
It's a flaw thing. Instead of looking at this from the 10,000 foot perspective of toxic diet culture and a system that was designed to keep you stuck and a system that was designed to keep you failing over and over again, we internalize this as we have with everything else in our life. Of course, we would internalize this. If, I see my best friend Susie down the road was able to drop 30 pounds, I can't. It's a me thing, right? It's my fault kind of thing.
Uh-huh. Yes, yes. And what most people don't understand is that the brain is a prediction machine, not a judgment machine.
Mhm.
It's not telling you you're a failure, even though that we create that story in our head. It's running a probability model based upon what it's seen before and based upon what it is that you are telling it.
Mm.
So the women who can't stick to anything or who've tried everything before, they've usually stuck to a lot of things, just not this thing. And the problem with this is that that story is far too broad,
Ooh.
right?
Yep.
It never works for me. I've tried everything. That's really, really broad. I can say I've tried keto. I can say that I've tried, the carnivore
Weight
diet. I can say
Watchers.
a lot. I've
Yep.
tried a lot of things and those did not work for me. But when I say, boy, I've tried everything, what we're saying is there's absolutely nothing out there that works for me. So by the time women usually come to us, that inner voice isn't just discouraging, it's very specific. I always lose weight and I gain it back. This is just what my body does now. I have PCOS, and this is just what it's like to have PCOS. This is just what it's like to be a middle-aged woman.
Hmm.
That specificity, sorry, I can't speak that word, is what makes it actually stick
Mm.
because now we're assigning it to ourselves. So, and as we talk later on, I'm going to actually talk about why the standard advice, positive self-talk, affirmations, mindset work, why that doesn't just fail for a lot of women, it actually makes it worse. And there's a physiological reason for why that occurs. So, I want to talk and I want to hit one point really specifically why the inner voice is so loud in midlife.
Hmm.
And that is what makes this episode really different. And that's what makes this podcast very different is that we're really speaking to us midlife mamas, those of us who have made it. We have done a lot of really hard stuff and we have conquered mountains. But now we're in a season of life where it seems like all the tools and tricks that we have tried before aren't working.
I love that you're bringing this up. This is so powerful because, again, we want to internalize it as a failure when women don't understand that perimenopause, menopause, which is AKA, again, hormone deficiency. Our hormones are declining. We stop producing these key hormones that kept us vital and ticking. So when I said you're not working with the same brain at 45 as you were working with at 30, right? We
Mhm.
naturally, right? I shouldn't say naturally, but rightfully so, we would try to internalize that. And it's not just a physical transition, you guys. This your brain is also in transition, and that's the part that doesn't get spoken to nearly enough. And your cognitive systems, your mood shifts, your increased anxiety, these aren't like they're not the weaknesses. It's your biology. It's your hormones saying, "Hey, help, help, I'm struggling here." And again, that's the shift that isn't talked about enough, I don't think.
And Nicole, could you brush a little bit on the hormones that change as we hit perimenopause and menopause and what they do for the brain? And then I'm going to tag that
Mhm.
as you listen with the neurochemistry behind then those hormone shifts. That goes a little bit more in depth in terms of why it becomes a predictive loop.
Yeah, let's talk about this. So, in perimenopause, which is the years bleeding into the day of menopause, remember, menopause itself is one day, you guys. One day. You've gone 12 full consecutive months without a period. Congratulations, the day after that, menopause, the day after that, postmenopause. Perimenopause are the years bleeding into the day of menopause. And this is when your hormones are have not completely depleted just yet, but they have like progesterone and testosterone are on a steep decline, and estrogen is, if you're not watching this, it has its peaks and its valleys. So I'm driving my finger
Mhm.
up and down. And estrogen is directly related to serotonin and dopamine regulation. And this is why specifically in perimenopause, and I know a lot of women are really going to relate to this. It's like 1 minute you're totally fine, everything Gucci, right? You're like, oh, everything's great. The next minute, nobody likes me, everybody hates me. I think I'm going to go get
Yes.
worms. And you don't know what sparked it. Your husband's chewing too loudly, whatever that may be, but just out of nowhere, it's like your whole personality flipped. And my husband jokes
Yes.
around. He's like, "What Nicole am I going to get today?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's a great question. I'm not 100% sure either."
I call it like middle school Anne, like the really
Yes.
insecure, like
Hmm.
everyone hates me, self-pity.
Yep.
That's what it's like. Suddenly our brain goes back to middle school.
Yes, exactly. And as estrogen drops, you guys, we have hundreds of estrogen receptors in our body. So when it has its like its ups and its downs in perimenopause, it's depleted in menopause. Like we stop producing it, right? And so this is where a lot of these symptoms come into play: hot flashes, mood swings, vaginal dryness, right? So replacing
Mhm.
this with a bioidentical version, we're not going to go into that into this episode. We've talked about this in, many episodes prior to, but um with the peaks and the valleys that it has in perimenopause, this is where, again, the erraticness comes into play. And your regulation, your emotional regulation system, it just becomes more reactive, meaning that inner
Hmm.
critic gets louder, your emotions are
Hmm.
heightened, things that used to never really phase you all of a sudden just are, it's like your whole world's crumbling kind of concept. And
Hmm.
it feels dramatic. Like listening me to say this might feel dramatic, but if you've ever experienced it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I have recently experienced, and this is something I've never struggled with before in my life, but panic and anxiety attacks in
Yes.
perimenopause, which are so common. And so this is something that, again, is it is very, very common. Just because it's common doesn't mean it needs to be your new normal. But understanding what's going on in this phase and in the transition that you're in is crucial to being able to regulate your nervous system here, which is a big piece of what Anne's going to talk about. But yes, that's
Yep.
what's going
And
on internally.
and this and I want to actually talk about the dopamine and serotonin that change during this because that's why there are significant mood shifts because serotonin is what we see. It's when we get Prozac, SSRIs, any form of SSRI, what it's doing is it's elevating that serotonin in that neuroptic the synaptic cleft. Wow, I need to enunciate today. And what happens is that think of it almost like it's kind of like grease. It helps move things along in the brain. And so when people have anxiety, when they have OCD, what's happening is the brain's containing it and it's essentially running it in a circle because they can't get anywhere. And so, and this is that's a very, very simplistic way of explaining this, but that drop in serotonin is dramatically impacting our mood. And this matters because this is occurring exactly at the time where we have to change behavior.
Hmm.
And it's when our brain is actually least equipped to tolerate that discomfort of change. We have less serotonin and then also dopamine stores go low. And dopamine, even though it gets referred to as a pleasure chemical, it's the anticipation chemical. So it's heavily linked to prediction and it's heavily linked to patterns of behavior because it's what it's doing when we release dopamine in our brain. When our brain gives us dopamine, it says something good is coming, I'm going to get relief.
Mm.
But it's not actually the relief itself. We release dopamine a lot of times in advance of getting the release, and that will motivate us towards behavior. So the inner voice of a 50-year-old, a 45-year-old, a 40-year-old woman isn't just personal history. It's history plus a nervous system under hormonal stress. And
Mm.
what I want to say here is that you're not failing at the same thing that you failed at 30. You're trying to do it with a completely different brain here.
Yep.
And so it's almost like junior high version 2.0, except the bullies that used to be outside of you that were impacting you are now stuck in your head.
Ooh, ooh, that is so powerful. There's so much truth to that. And we are our own worst inner critic. We all know this, but those, again, the voices, again, the bullies, that's just a really great way to put it because it's heightened. It's heightened now with hormone fluctuation and not understanding. I talk to women every single day, and I feel like a stranger in my own body is the number one thing that I hear when they're speaking to directly menopause itself, right? The transition and these, it's like 1 minute or 1 minute. One day I woke up and it just everything changed for me. And there's nothing more frustrating than not being knowing that something is off, but not necessarily as a woman, because we are so intuitive. As women, we are so intuitive. And we know when something, and specifically your own body, you know when something is off. And so there's that frustration when these voices are, like Anne said, the bullies, we'll call them the bullies, they're screaming at you internally. You know, intuition wise, that something is off, but yet you have a provider who's trying to convince you that this is just, it's normal, it's fine. Sounds like you might be slightly depressed. This is what,
Mhm.
aging is. And so you have somebody who you trust because they are a provider, they went to school, this is what they do, trying to tell you that this is just, sounds like, you're just hitting what midlife is and things are a little stressful at home. Have you tried, therapy? Here's a prescription, like Anne said, for an SSRI that you didn't really ask for. So something that you've never really struggled with your entire life is now just so loud and rampant in your head that you
Mhm.
don't know how to internalize or work through that.
That's right. And this concept though of midlife crisis now comes into mind as we're talking through
Hmm.
this. And
Yep.
sometimes that midlife crisis is because we haven't gotten to where it is that we thought we wanted to be or where we were going to be. And sometimes, which is more of a psychological phenomenon, but sometimes it's simply because neurochemistry is changing and hormones are shifting. And so we're suddenly at a place that we haven't been at for decades or never have been at, feeling things that we don't know even remotely how to cope with and not being able to write this voice in our head. And what I'm going to talk about is why affirmations don't work and what they do instead and also what to know instead. So the brain doesn't update identity through intention, it updates through evidence.
Mhm.
When someone who genuinely believes, I always quit, I can't do this, I'm just going to be a fat person the rest of my life, finally says, I am consistent and disciplined. This is positive affirmations. Okay. The brain doesn't accept it, it actually rejects it. There's research on this. Affirmations work for people with moderate self doubt. They do not work for people when they're struggling with consistency. They do not work when we have major degrees of self doubt or when when we're managing something that's hard for us in a new way. So they backfire for people with deeply held negative identity beliefs because what happens is that as we're doing the positive affirmation, our brain is giving us evidence to the contrary.
Mhm.
You say you're consistent. What is this day one of 365 that you are doing diet over again? Yeah. You
Yeah.
say you're disciplined, but the last 20 years, that wasn't super disciplined, was it? This is why this idea of just believing yourself is genuinely useless advice. And most of us actually know it, which is why we're skeptical of anyone who leads us with that mindset type of work. And it almost seems too kind of like bubblegum Barbie cheesy is what I like to say.
Yeah.
We're getting these a lot of times we get this advice from 20 something year olds that are in the prime of their life, have lots of energy, have lots of enthusiasm. Maybe they've only failed one thing in their life or they've only struggled in one area and their body is just bounced back overnight, right? We're rejecting it as middle-aged women because we're like, I I was there. I
Been there,
understand.
done that. I've seen this rodeo play out a few different times. Let me know in 20 years how that works for you.
That's right. Oh, oh,
Oh,
sweetheart, you
you're
look like
so cute.
you haven't had a child yet, or you're on kid two, and you bounce back after 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Aren't you adorable? Yes.
So, so
And
cute.
no offense to women who have done that. I get it. You didn't do anything wrong, but we're a bit more jaded, and we're also struggling in different ways. So, what actually works is small, specific, completable actions that the brain can file as evidence, not affirmations evidence. And this is where it gets interesting because the size of the action almost doesn't matter. What matters is that it was completed. And I'll
Mm,
explain why this is.
mm,
So, I want to go back to dopamine isn't the pleasure chemical, it's the anticipation and it's the progress chemical, it's the motivation chemical. So it releases on the completion of a task, but it also releases in advance of a task. This is what actually draws us to certain foods that we struggle to put down because it says, oh, I remember eating donuts. And when I eat donuts and I eat too many donuts, it feels amazing for that time that I'm eating the donuts, right? So I get that dopamine burst in advance because I've already made the decision to go and eat the donuts. Well, when it releases on completion of a task, especially tasks that were predicted and followed through, that is actually a loop. And this is an act. This is like essentially cue, response, reward.
mm,
And that is how all habits are formed. And when we have repeated action with cue, response, reward, what happens is the basal ganglia, which is the habit center of the brain. It is the, what I like to call it's the efficiency center.
mm,
So that when it actually has a pattern that it says, okay, every single time this happens, this is my response, and then I get this benefit from it. That basal ganglia, all it does once it's automated, it gets a little chunk of that cue and the end result of the reward, and then the action is automated. So it
mm,
doesn't actually pay attention. And this is really significant for us as human beings because what we're always trying to do is we're trying to write the response while battling with the cue.
mm.
And what I mean by that is we're trying to go towards the big goals. We're trying to say, like, I want to lose 50 pounds. I want to work out 5 days a week. And I've just previously been sitting on a couch and I want to go to Whole Food.
I want to flip my whole world upside down because in the moment that sounds really, really good in the moment. The idea of the follow through on that isn't so good, but the in the moment that sounds really, really good.
Yes. So what happens then is that big goals wind up interrupting that loop because there's no completion signal or it's too long. I'm waiting too long to get it complete. So the brain doesn't reward this because it's ambition. It rewards only finished things. So women who have been in diet culture for literally decades, we have been trained to set massive goals, run a marathon, lose 50 pounds, whole 30, keto carnivore. We're like literally turning. I remember at certain points in my life, I was like getting rid of like tons of food in my pantry. But the problem is that we don't receive a completion signal until the very end of it, which oftentimes we can't reach, or it's so far out and there's only a small reward. This is where we lose the 50 pounds or we lose the 25 pounds and then we go, oh, that's amazing. And then what do?
Go back
Right
to
after that,
hmm
we start eating again.
celebrate and go back to the old habits that got us to a place where we were 50 pounds overweight to begin with. Yep.
That's right. And
Mhm.
that's because we didn't build a reinforcing habit loop that was small enough to complete on a daily basis.
Well, and
We
these
were
big goals
making,
too, what I want to point out here, and I love that you're talking about this because there's nothing wrong with setting a big goal of I want to
yep,
lose 50 pounds. That is not what we're saying. But what
yep.
we're saying is to break it into these micro goals and these smaller goals that you can hit along the way. Because what happens with this idea, like Anne said, if I want to lose 50 pounds, I'm going to cut out all sugar. I'm going to eat 1,200 calories a day. I'm going to go to the gym 6 days a week. I'm going to add in all of this cardio. And then what's the thing that goes when life, right? When life gets
Mm,
hard, as it always does, the thing that goes is the thing that is met with the most resistance.
that's right.
And so this is what I call the ethic card. This is when you start to pull out the ethic card. You're like, well, this is just too hard. So what goes? I can't go to the gym 6 days a week. So you're like, I'm going to drop that to 3 days a week. And then I'm going to drop that to no days a week because it's unrealistic and I can't do that. I can't track my food. This is too time consuming. So you just, go back into these old generic approaches. I'm just going to do keto, which doesn't drive results because again, there's so much generic there. So you eat keto, but you're not in a calorie deficit. And you're like, well, keto doesn't work. And then you're just reinforcing these, like Anne said, these loops, these patterns that you put yourself in. And so, really being able to have a big, tangible goal at the top, I love that. But breaking it down into it's okay, I don't want to just lose 50 pounds. I need to become the person that loses the 50 pounds. And the person that loses the 50 pounds has these small micro commitments that she keeps to herself every single day. She hits a protein goal, she hits a step goal, she hits a water goal. She is intentional with her training. She time blocks her schedule to allow for these big rocks to fit within her day to make sure that she stays on quote unquote track. I hate saying on track because some women have this like I'm either on track or off track mentality. But with that being said, it is these micro habits that, obviously lead to the big outcome. And I love that you're speaking to that because again, the thing that goes is the thing that's met with the most resistance. So if you try to flip your whole world upside down, this is why you only stick to something for 2 weeks at a time, 3 weeks at a
Yes,
time, because it's too
yes.
overwhelming. It's too daunting. Your brain can't process that in the same way that it did at 30, you guys. It just doesn't.
Yes. And let me point out that when you do too much all at once, your nervous system
Oh, yeah.
reads that as stressful and it raises cortisol levels. So we're literally working against our nervous system as we're trying to cultivate new habits and as we're in an estrogen depletion. As
Hmm.
our like with brain fog, with lack of motivation, energy, we're confused. We've got this like little junior high girl sitting inside of our head telling us we suck. Like we're trying to do too much all at once. And Nicole, I'm curious for you if you feel comfortable sharing, but like as a coach, when you have a woman that comes in that is in perimenopause and she's been doing this yo-yo dieting, the whole thing, and she begins with, I've tried everything and nothing works for me, and she has no concept of like what it looks like to kind of change. What are the top two things that you really work on?
Hmm. I work at the reframe at the top, right? That's going to be the biggest thing. And so it's like what you're really telling me when you say I've tried absolutely everything and nothing works is I've tried absolutely every dog shit low calorie cookie cutter BS approach that I can stick with for, 2 weeks in total before it completely railroads me. I have no energy. It's overwhelming. It's daunting. And I go right back into old limiting habits, patterns, and beliefs that kept me stuck. So let's call
Hmm.
that for what it is. You've tried every single cookie cutter approach, and they're all just wrapped up in a different shiny package and tied up with a different, pretty, like a different bow kind of thing, right? So
Yes.
keto, Whole 30, Weight Watchers, intermittent fasting, Plexus, Optavia, Noom. So what you need to understand at the 10,000 foot view is that fat loss works very generically in one way, a calorie deficit. The mechanism that you choose is what drives, like, so you could use keto and you could cut carbs, and that could be a way to create a calorie deficit. Sure. So you've tried that. You could fast and only eat within magical windows, and that could be a way to create a calorie deficit. Sure. You've tried that. Right. And so what you're saying is, I've tried these different mechanisms, but none of these mechanisms have really fit into my lifestyle to create a sustainable way to go about this, to not just get the weight off, but actually keep the weight off in a way that doesn't suck my soul in the process. So we need to get very clear on that, because this whole mentality, I've tried everything, is like Anne said, it's reinforcing this loop and this behavior. And so you're basically telling your brain, well, I've already tried these things. So I come into this, and you're already telling yourself, from habits and things that you've done in the past, that you're going to quit 2 weeks down the road. So this is
Yes.
different. We're not starting off
Yes.
with that mentality. We're just not. And I promise you, and this is where, coaching really shines. I just had a really powerful coaching call with our team yesterday. But it is this idea that we want to think that we're the special unicorn. We want to think we're the one person that this just won't work for. I promise you guys, I've coached thousands of women. You are not the exception to the rule. You're not. Again, there are things that make things more challenging. So we look at menopause, when you said women come in, specifically menopause and hormones. Now, does menopause, because you hear people say, there's just so much noise online. It's like, you can't lose weight in menopause. Everything changes in menopause. And it's like, no, menopause doesn't change the foundation of fat loss. It does reduce our margin for error, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It makes things more challenging. We talk about the rewire, we talk just the brain chemistry, and as estrogen starts to decline, yes, and hormones indirectly impact fat loss. But we cannot come into this with this preconceived notion that we're the special unicorn, and my age and my metabolism is slowing down, and my PCOS and my insulin resistance and my autoimmune and my, right? All of these things that have stacked, because again, that is evidence to the brain that you're already telling yourself you're going to fail subconsciously. That is exactly what you're doing, because that's the thing that has always happened. So we need to identify at the 10,000 foot view again, what are we truly dealing with? Yes, we're dealing with hormone deficiency. Yes, we're working through insulin resistance and PCOS and autoimmune, and that requires a much more strategic approach. But you cannot tell me that you've tried everything to tackle those things. Because again, if we get
Yes.
really clear, you've tried the same thing wrapped up in a different shiny package, and that's exactly why you continue to fail.
Yes. Yes. And one of the things that I love about this is that there's a strategy behind it, because women don't need more motivation, they need more completion.
Evidence, evidence. Yes.
Yes, the motivation will follow that completion.
Hmm.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about what this looks like in practice and what you can actually do with this. Because it's not about replacing the phrase, I always quit, with I'm learning consistency. That's just words. And the brain actually notices that. It's like, no, you're not. Um,
Yeah.
it cares about what happened. So it's about doing one thing and noticing what happened when you did it. That's it. And if you do that one thing, like one of the tasks I worked with someone on a long time ago was literally just getting in the car and driving to the gym. That's all they had to do. They could not get in the car and drive to the gym. And I said, great, we're just going to do that. And they're like, well, what's the point of that?
Yep.
Just do it. Just try it. It's just to get something completed.
Mm.
And we started working on baby steps with this, and we kept building this out and building it out and building it out. And before they knew it, in I think it was like 6 months, they were at the gym. They were working out 30 minutes, 4 days a week in 6 months. And that was a behavior that had plagued them for literally years, where they had completed it but never completed it. So they would go to the gym 4 days a week, they try to work out 30 minutes, they get really sore, they didn't want to do it one day, and suddenly 2 weeks, maybe even 3 weeks of what they said was momentum was lost overnight.
Mhm.
And they were able to get there much more graciously. They were feeling really encouraged. And what was really dramatic about this is then they got a stomach bug. They couldn't go to the gym for a whole week. They were feeling kind of bad about that, but then they're like, man, I can't wait to go back to the gym.
You start to look forward to it, opposed to dread it. Something that,
That's right.
yep.
Because their brain had already completed it as something that they were successful with.
And this is where I talk about same concept when it comes to, we speak to tracking and how powerful tracking is. We have so many episodes where we talked about how it is no different than budgeting your bank account, and fat loss becomes so much easier when you understand input and output. It just point blank, end of story. But when it comes to tracking, there's so much resistance that's met with tracking, that's why I always when I'm speaking to somebody, it's like it's the overwhelm. track your protein. Just start with one thing, one number, right?
That's
And
it.
continue to build on that. That's the same. That's exactly what we're talking about here. But as women, we look at that and we think that we're failing because if we're not tracking all of our macros and we're not doing it correctly, and it's again that all or nothing mentality that produces all or nothing results. But chances are for 98.99999% of you, percent of women listen, percent of you women, percent of women listening to this. Sorry, I obviously can't talk today either. You would see amazing success just by increasing your protein intake. Your cravings would go down. You would have more energy, the ability to sustain and maintain muscle mass just by that one input alone, tracking
Yes.
your protein.
Yes.
And that stacks, that evidence starts to stack, right? And then you start to feel that effect and you want a little bit more. It's like we're dangling the little carrot in front of the rabbit. But
Yes.
but for most women, again, we have this we need to do all of the things perfectly or we do none of the things at all.
Yes. And be careful what it is that you say to yourself, because if you end a completion with, well, that doesn't really matter, or that's not that big of a deal, or a lot of times I'll hear people say, well, I had a great week, I tracked, I went to the gym, but I didn't lose any weight. If we keep saying, well, here's evidence that this isn't working,
Mhm.
what we're doing is we're focused on that big goal instead of the process. And as you guys probably have heard before, and as Nicole knows so well about me, is I'm big on process and I'm less big on goals. Yes, we need a goal so we know where we're going, but we're going to fall to our process
Mhm.
every single time.
Yep.
And if the process is discouraging yourself, and think about this too. If you have a child or a best friend and they're doing something that's hard for them and they complete something that's hard for them and they come back and they're like, oh, but I only got a C on the test, or your best friend says, well, I did the hard thing, but I didn't get what I wanted out of it. Man, I just suck at this. We are going to encourage them. We are not going to discourage them and go, yeah, you should probably stop doing that.
Yeah, that was never really made for you to begin with, right? Like,
Yeah, you're
yeah.
probably just bad at math. You need to just give up now. You're just probably gonna get C's the rest of your life.
Yeah, just
No, please.
drop out of college, no point. Just
And if, and if you're doing that, please come and talk to a therapist, talk to me. Like we need to really work on that outer voice that's coming out. Um, but again, that's that prediction, right? We have to be able to acknowledge when we're discouraging ourselves versus when we say, "Yay, I got it completed. Yes, I did it. That
yep.
was really hard."
Yes. And I would love to do it. This is a separate episode. Maybe next week we can chat about this behind the scenes. I would love to do an episode with you on parts work and just those inner
Oh,
voices because I think that that would be, she claps. And I'm like, I have just, it has changed it's changed the way I've communicated with my husband. It's changed the way I communicate with my staff, with myself. It has just been so powerful for me. I think there can be a lot of just really powerful takeaways for those that listen. So let's plot that out. Those listening, let's plot that out for next week, and just maybe we could even break it. It's probably even a series of podcasts, to be honest with you, because there's so
I like it.
much there to unpack.
Yes.
But when you said that, and you talk about, we follow our processes, and the first thing that came to mind was parts that are there to keep us safe, right? Parts that tell us a story because of something that happened in childhood that are there to keep us safe. And we fall to when you say, our process, but we fall victim to our parts that we
Yes.
don't necessarily know are there. Like we don't, subconsciously they're, that's, internally they're trying to keep us safe to what feels comfortable. But this is again a whole different podcast we're going to start this series next week. There's just so much power to that, but move on.
Yeah.
Sorry, I swirled.
Yeah.
I
No, no,
swirled.
no. You were good. I love that. I just got excited. I was like, oh, let's start talking about it now. No, not that's what we're not going to do. But and I want to be really cautious about this because simply just focusing on the negative thought and noticing the negative thought is going to actually encourage the negative thought. If we have an idea of really encouraging ourselves when we have a win, like if I notice a negative thought and then I just go, oh, there it is again, can't seem to stop telling myself really crappy stuff. All you're going to do is magnify that thought and you're going to increase the amount that your brain repeats it.
Yep. I would say your identity drives your actions and your actions drive your outcome.
Yes. But if we're staying focused on noticing the negative thought and then replacing it ever so gently, I'm working, I did it. I did the thing that I set out to do.
Yep.
Okay, right? And what will happen over time is at some point something will shift and it's not going to be really dramatic. It's going to be really quiet, but you'll notice it
Mhm.
because what will happen is that you stop talking to yourself about negative things and about character defects. and you start actually encouraging yourself and you start doing more things to complete more tasks, to complete more baby tasks. And that's what momentum actually feels like. It's not motivation, it's not excitement, it's just less resistance and it's having a process
Mhm.
that really defines the goals. Right. So, and I know even with social media, when I first got a virtual assistant, I did virtually nothing. She was running everything. I was not, I was like, great, you go and do that thing. I don't want to work more. It's fine. Right. And it was kind of this concept of like, I have too much on my plate. This has been a theme for me in my life. And I do tend to have a lot on my plate. And once I finally realized that I could do little tidbits of 5 minutes here, 10 minutes here, I had an idea and I'd put it out and I'd write an outline and then I'd talk about it. And suddenly I was building out like in just one afternoon, 10, 15 clips or an entire 30-day series. And it wasn't anything more than 5 or 10 minutes here or there. It
Mm.
wasn't massive.
I love that. And I love that you brought up that it's the less resistance part. And that's, I think, something that enough, or I think that that's something that not enough women focus on is that, okay, maybe it doesn't like make you giddy. Let's talk about working out. Let's use that for an example, right? Maybe working out doesn't make you giddy like it does me because I geek out on it. I love it. I truly love being down in the gym. It is part of who I am and it's deeply ingrained in my soul. Doesn't mean I'm always motivated to do it, which is completely, and that's a different podcast again for a different day. But maybe again, it doesn't get you giddy like it gets me, but maybe there's less resistance to the idea of working out.
Yes.
And you
Yes.
don't lean enough into that. Maybe the thought before you started something was so overwhelming, it was so daunting, there's absolutely no way. Same thing when it comes to tracking. There's so much resistance for a lot of people when it comes to tracking. Maybe tracking doesn't make you uberly excited, but you don't like it doesn't completely send you into a spiral. And I think again, there's something powerful to lean into there. When you notice yourself softening a bit to things that you used to automatically put up walls to because it's impossible, it's overwhelming, it's hard, and you're like, "Oh, okay. All right, maybe I could see how that works."
Uh-huh.
Maybe I could picture myself tracking just my protein intake. I don't have to track everything, but maybe I could track just this thing. And noticing again the soften there, noticing the open-mindedness around you basically saying, okay, I'm pulling myself out of my ego enough to know that I'm stubborn and this clearly isn't working, but maybe I could.
Yes.
That is powerful.
Yes. And can I say, don't be like me. Don't go, well, if tracking my protein is good, then I'm going to go one step above that and I'm going to do better. I'm just going to go for all of it right now. Like that was me in a nutshell right there. Well, why am I doing anything with only half effort? I want to go all the way in. And this is that concept too. Too big gets overwhelming, releases cortisol. It actually decreases motivation because we don't have enough wins.
hmm And look at it as the goal is to, like Anne said, why am I only tracking protein? Well, the goal is to eventually track everything, but let's get you tracking protein with a 90+% consistency rating. And when I
Yeah.
say 90+%, I mean not just when it's new or fun or exciting. I mean, even when lives, even when somebody called in for sick for work, you're still tracking your protein, you're still hitting that. And it starts to become, again, a habit. It starts to become something that you do without even thinking about. That's when we start to say, okay, I've got this mastered. It doesn't feel as hard. It doesn't feel as overwhelming. The idea of tracking my protein doesn't send me into a complete and total spiral anymore. Maybe I'm going to look at calories now too. So I'm going to
Yeah.
go from tracking just protein to now protein and calories.
Yes. And
And that is the progression that we're looking for.
and I just want to note this takes longer in midlife than it does when we're in our 20s and 30s. And a large part of this is because we have 20, if not 30 years of evidence to the contrary that's working against us, and we have slightly less neuroplasticity that we did when we were in our 20s and 30s. So our brain isn't kind of moving as efficiently as it used to. It doesn't mean that it can't move. It doesn't mean that it won't. It just simply means it has a lot of evidence to the contrary. So be really patient with yourself. Be really gracious with yourself. Start small, smaller than you might have in your 20s. That's okay. But we're just going for completions to give your brain evidence that this idea that you can't do hard stuff isn't accurate, or this idea that things won't work for you, that it's not actually the thing.
Yeah. But I also want to point out here, again, I'm not trying to squirrel, be gracious with yourself, yes, but have the grit, have the follow through. Because it's one thing to say this is really hard and continue to tell yourself this is really hard and just not do it because it's really hard.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So that's one thing to say, be gracious with yourself. And I love that idea because as women, we tend to be overly judgmental and hard on ourselves. So give yourself grace, but also have the grit for the follow through. Also have the, intentionality of, yes, this might be really hard. But again, as Anne would say, I can do hard things and I can break this down into chunks so it doesn't feel so hard. But the follow through has to be there. None of this happens, like you said, your brain is wired for evidence. What drives action drives that.
That's
So you can
right.
think all day long and you can continue to reinforce a story that's really hard, but if you don't have the follow through, that's the whole part of this. That's the snowball effect that we're looking for here.
That's right. And once your brain learns that you can do hard things and that you can be successful doing hard things, it automates it in the basal ganglia. So remember that cue response reward. What
Mm,
happens is really powerful once we have multiple completions under our belt and we begin to change our identity based upon setting up these baby goals based upon being kind to ourselves, even like, oh, I actually can do really hard stuff. I've done that now for 3 weeks. I've done that for 4 weeks. Huh. I can get up and go to the gym.
yep. And watch
I
that
can
little
look
extra
great.
pep in your step, right? You just move a little bit different. You have a little bit more swagger and you can't quite pinpoint exactly what it is, but it's because you continue to stack undeniable evidence that again, you are who you say you are. That's what this
Mhm.
is. That's exactly what it is. It's stacking the evidence, and your brain is wired by evidence. It
That's right.
loves the follow through.
And your brain, specifically the basal ganglia, picks that up and it automates that. And so
Mhm.
this is where we get momentum building practice. And it starts really simple. It starts with one thing. Momentum building now leads into every area of life because you have created an identity based upon completions.
We did a whole podcast talking about how fit translates into every other area of your life. So if you guys didn't listen
Yep.
to that one, go back and listen to that. Not fit because you have a specific body, but why, like what it takes to achieve that body and how that
Yes,
translates again into every other area of your life. Notice how all of these episodes that we do, they're all so interconnected for a reason. They all kind of ping pong off of each other.
they do. Go listen to it.
Go
Yeah.
listen to it. Yeah, go listen to that one.
Anything else that you think would be useful for us to chat about on this one or any other takeaways on this one?
Hmm. I guess just stop waiting to feel ready. Ready is what happens after. I I do think that there's power to understand we think that there's this perfect time. It's like this there's always a perfect time for something and something is always going to life. You guys, it's the vacation, it's the this, it's the that. I mean, how many times have you told yourself I'm going to start this thing after the holidays?
Oh, yeah.
After the this, after the big promotion, after the big work, project that I have. And once I finally complete that, then I'm going to do the thing. There's always going to be the next thing. There will
Yep.
always, always, always be. And I know if you're listening to this, I know that you know that, but being able to point and call yourself out when you find yourself going down that rabbit, because I do that. I tend to do that in different areas, not necessarily health and fitness, but I'm like, once I complete this big work project, and it's like, there's always going to be the next thing. And so, really just understanding that again, ready is what happens after. And you
Yes.
have to be able to put yourself in that mentality.
Yes. Yes.
All
All
right.
right. So
It's
I
good.
like
It's
it.
been good. It's been a good one. I'd love to hear your guys' feedback if you found value to this. As always, you guys were always just, we love the feedback. We love the support. We love the comments and the shares and the tags. And it's so funny because of all of my social media platforms, everybody just more podcast episodes, more podcast episodes, more podcast episodes. So if you guys have ideas for more podcast episodes, we are here for those as well. We love any sort of input that way. But I think a whole series, Anne, on parts work could be
Oh,
so powerful. I'm so
let's
here for
build
that.
that.
Yeah, let's build that. And just really understanding what that is in a whole. Because well, I'm going to say that for a minute because I was going to start to bleed into what it is, but I'll be here for hours talking about it. So
Yep.
just be excited. We're going to build that out. But like I said, you guys, any sort of ideas or just suggestions that you have, we're always open to. And comments, like, shares, reviews mean absolutely everything to us. But if you don't have anything else, Sam, I think we'll see you guys in the
No.
next episode. All right.
Yeah.
Ciao, you guys.
If this is helpful, give me a like, follow me, or subscribe for more.